Welcome to another edition of Table Manners for Robots. Thank you for joining us. Today's topic is particularly pertinent. We are dealing with a planet that is going through quite literally unprecedented change, and we are dealing with all sorts of difficulty that comes as a result of uncertainty. So, the lowest common denominator of the difficulty that a lot of business leaders and people in general are facing right now is the is predicated on the major assumption of uncertainty. So we are living through very uncertain times. It's very hard to make strong business decisions at a time like this. A lot of us are feeling our way through. And today's discussion is all about that. It's all about the importance of insight and how do we employ insight and how do we employ techniques of insight to outmaneuver the situation that we all find ourselves in. So today, I'm very happy that we were able to get some super good speakers who have agreed to give us their knowledge, who are working closely with BlackVox who have partnered with BlackVox to get this important message into the market. So I'm very glad to be joined by both Kelvin and Kristina. I'm not going to attempt to do a very in-depth welcome, and I'm not going to attempt to do justice to their background. So what we're going to do is I'm going to launch straight into the introductions, where they're going to give you a little bit more of the story behind themselves. And on that note, I'm going to start with Kristina. Kristina, welcome to the show, and tell us a little bit about your background.
Yes, thank you so much, Karushan. Hey guys, I'm Kristina. I'm from Seattle, Washington. A bit about me: when I was 18, I moved abroad. I moved to France for my degree in international business from the American University of Paris. And then I did my master's in business management at Vlerick Business School in Belgium. Professionally, I began my career in software as a service in Belgium, where I was with Showpad, which is a Silicon Valley tech startup's European headquarters in sales enablement. And now I'm based in Johannesburg for the last year and a half with YOUKNOW. We're the African partner to deep listening and consumer research tools Brandwatch, Global Index, Chorus, and Hootsuite.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kristina. Kelvin, tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. Thanks, Karushan. Hi, everybody. My name is Kelvin Jonck. I founded and run YOUKNOW working with Kristina. Personally, I am a born and bred Cape Townian who's found himself in Gauteng for the last 25 years. So I'm not sure if I can call myself a Cape Townian anymore. But had ambitions of playing basketball in the NBA and tried my hand at acting and theater for a long time and writing, and then decided to follow the money and ended up studying engineering, computer engineering at that. Followed a bit of a trail, moving into digital marketing, affiliate marketing, until I got the lucky opportunity to work for Cell C and head up their digital division for a couple of years, which eventually led to this bug of starting a company, and that was 6 years ago.
Fantastic. I always love it when I hear this very rich, diverse set of experiences that sit behind a lot of the people that we interview. I always think it brings such amazing variety and dimension to answers and techniques and ways of thinking. So let's go back to Kristina there. Kristina, what made you? What got you to this point where you are doing what you're doing today? Like, what made you specialize in this area?
Yeah, totally. So in business school, we learn to work smarter and not harder. So it's really rewarding to see how technology as a field, as a specialization, is bringing this man and machine methodology into marketing and the brand space, and how this is making impact for business. I'm a firm believer in letting technology do this sort of heavy number crunching and heavy lifting, and let people do what people do best, which is build relationships, strategize, and act creatively using the data.
Fantastic. Makes a lot of sense. How about you, Kelvin?
Yeah, I think the story is kind of maybe why I started the company. And while I was working at Cell C, we had this almost a bit of a startup mentality, and we realized a couple of things. Specifically about the fact that customers were giving us all of this data on a daily basis. Insights, nuggets about themselves, little pieces of information about their hobbies and their needs. And every time you would want to use it, there was somebody working on some big data project that would take 3 to 5 years. And I kind of felt there was a better way of actioning those the small data, the actionable data. And the other side to that was, we sitting in Africa, we had the option of using local suppliers to do a lot of those things. And if we wanted to use some of the bigger global technologies that had a lot of investment behind them, we were possibly treated as second-class citizens, sitting on support calls at 10 p.m. at night. And so when we started the company, it was kind of a decision of how do we bridge that gap? How do we close the loop and allow African professionals to have access to the best tech in the world, but with local expertise, local support, local training. And that's kind of led us down this path of becoming a channel partner for cool tech.
Awesome. Great story there. Now let's get into this, the meat of the conversation. We are facing a market that is just, dealing with towering uncertainty. We've never had, like I said in the introduction, this is unprecedented times. And there is a sense of overwhelm. I've spoken to some very powerful business leaders myself, and a lot of them have succumbed to this notion that we are faced with uncertainty, and uncertainty is the only thing we can be sure of. So sometimes, you just have to shrug your shoulders and just go with it. How do you guys respond to that? Kristina, let's start with you.
Yeah, no, it's so true. Certainty is out the window. However, brands really cannot just keep going as usual. And we've seen many examples of this reading as tone deaf. I'm thinking of, there's an Outsurance ad with thousands of people at a stadium just as lockdown was happening, and we're like, what? That's not the case right now. And brands also can't just freeze and copy and paste their usual answers. I'm thinking of the case of Superbalist just recently, who was not taking any supportive stance on the Black Lives Matter movement, and that really blew up for them, even though they were just following what their usual company policy was. What we're really seeing is that what people want to see from brands has changed. They want personality, they want connection, they want social values. And it's more important now, more than ever, to understand the perception of your brand in the market and what's going to actually reach the hearts of your consumers. So bottom line, super tough to be a brand right now in this uncertain market. And it's so important for brands to be informed and aligned with their customer viewpoints.
Yeah, that makes sense. So basically, if I understand your point correctly, while it might be tempting for a business leader to do the whole shrug your shoulders and go, let's just go with it, let's see where it's headed, we can't really make big decisions right now, we have to ride this one out. That's another common line that I hear. So you are saying, in response to that, as much as it might be tempting to do that, we carry as business leaders an additional onus at this time. We have to work even harder to get those golden nuggets of insight. We have to work even harder to understand the consumer at this time, instead of just succumbing to the invitation to do nothing. All right.
Definitely.
Cool. So Kelvin, I'm so curious to understand, what are some of the trends in the market that we are seeing? What's actually happening out there that we might not be seeing as visibly or tangibly, perhaps in the newspapers, etc.? What's actually going on out there?
I think there's maybe two ways of looking at that. There's the consumer side, and then there's the way that organizations are potentially handling this. And from an organization perspective, we're actually noticing that there's a lot of organizations that are speeding up their buzzword digital transformation projects because of the changing workforce, how everybody needs to be adapting to the new work from home policies. So CTOs are kind of paying attention and putting tech behind their initiatives as well. From a consumer perspective, one of the really interesting things that one of my colleagues shared with me was, as South Africans, we are way more optimistic than we give ourselves credit for. If you had to dip your finger into the Twitter and Facebook streams at any point in time, you'd think that we're throwing in the towel. But when you actually start asking people very specific questions and guiding them to answer these very specific questions, you'll find that South Africans see this silver lining at the end. The stat that stood out to me was when asked whether South Africans are not optimistic at all about the situation, only 9% of people said yes to that answer. Whereas in Japan, 32% people said no hope whatsoever. And that was really resonated with me. The fact that we can moan and we can complain, and that's our right, and we should be questioning everything. But there's an optimism that I think brands can tap into with South Africans that we've noticed in a couple of ads that have been coming out.
Interesting. I think it's all a case of it's all relative. And I think relative to what South Africans have been through, what we continue to go through, I think, this is par for the course. It's almost like we were a little bit more lockdown ready from a tolerance point of view. It's an interesting thing. I'm just trying to rapidly explain why it is that we're so optimistic compared with some of the more developed markets. All right. Yeah. This is just an interesting conversation. I really love getting into this. So tell me, any other examples of trends that we were not expecting? Anything else that you're seeing there that we weren't quite expecting, and that it kind of surprises you?
It's interesting you talk about being lockdown ready. One of the other metrics that kind of stood out for me from a study that Global Web Index did was that South Africans seem to be very keen on this work from home trend, and after the lockdown and pandemic ends, apparently 70% of us are extremely or very interested in continuing work from home, which is almost understandable. You would expect that to be one of the things, but when you compare it to the US or the UK, that seems to be only about 45%. So there's a massive gap between what South Africans expect after all of this when compared to our Northern Hemisphere counterparts. The other really fun thing that stood out was exercising and exercising at home, where 50% of South Africans said that after this is over, they're going to continue to exercise from home. And if you're Virgin Active or Planet Fitness, you need to start paying attention to that, because the global standard doesn't seem to reflect that at all. There's 31% of people will say, yeah, we'll do that, whereas the South Africans are way more than that.
Very, very interesting. And folks, I encourage you, this is very much a discussion. It's very much an open line. That's how we do these shows, Table Manners for Robots. We try to make it as participative as possible. So I invite you to become part of the conversation. Share your thoughts and ideas in the Q&A box. Let me know what's on your mind. Let me know what you're thinking. I will do my best to integrate your thoughts and comments into my questioning. And I want to impress on everyone here. We've got a great attendance today. We're streaming on several different live services, and we've also got a Zoom event going, and on all counts we are looking very good on numbers. So I want to invite you guys into the conversation, and I don't want you to be shy. The reality is that this has something to do with you. If you're not selling to a consumer, you're hiring people, and when it comes to people and their sentiment and their thoughts and their feelings, we need to be in tune, because like I said, if not from a sales point of view, it's definitely from an employee management point of view. It's important to keep an ear to the ground. Kelvin, before we let you off the hook there, just let's just deep dive into Africa for a second. Let's talk about the difficult point. A lot of people have the idea that when it comes to data and understanding data and trends in Africa, that we're not ready. We don't have the systems, we don't have substantial digital footprints locally, and to that end, it's very hard for us as business leaders to make sound decisions based on digital data within the African context. What's your views on that? Is that true?
I don't agree with that. No, I think that there is a constantly growing amount of data. People are ebbing and flowing between being comfortable what they share online in certain ways, but we can't really compare ourselves against the Northern Hemisphere, European and US markets. The volumes are completely different, sure, but in Africa, people are digital, believe it or not. We maybe got this 10-year-old illusion that a large proportion of people aren't online at all, but more and more people, I think the World Bank estimated we're about 60% penetration in South Africa at the moment. And at some way, those people are contributing to the digital data that is out there. Some of them are posting those opinions publicly, and some of them are willing to answer more private surveys. Some of them are giving us data via their movements around our digital assets. So I think it's a matter of scale, but the reliability of that data I don't believe can be questioned, because it is it's sound and it's fair. And we found some incredible insights by working with some of our customers in using that data.
I mean, you mentioned as well that volumes might be different, but trends are still valid. Do you have any examples of what we see locally in terms of orders of magnitude? Are we talking thousands of data points, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands? And how does that compare internationally?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's at least maybe 10 to 20 times less than what you would see in something like the UK. I'm not going to compare us to the US because the numbers there are vastly different, but where the UK might have a slightly similar population, we might be seeing 10% less. And yes, it's very true that we probably are seeing a lot of that data from certain segments of the market. But it's important to take that from whence it comes. If we're willing to understand which market we're listening to and apply those insights to that market, we're still winning. It's not a matter of assuming that all the data is incorrect or incomplete because maybe only 60% or 70% of the population are contributing to that.
All right, and are we seeing those patterns change now with COVID, and now that we are pretty much forced towards using more digital systems, and we're a little bit more digital reliant? Are we seeing any changes in those trends?
Yeah, very much so. One of the aspects that we deal with our customers are inbound customer service queries, and there's an incredible influx of people moving towards digital channels to discuss their issues, to talk to brands. WhatsApp is just blowing up. So there is, I mean, obviously there's a limitation to who has access to Wi-Fi and continual data, but the fact that they can't go and stand in a queue at the bank to ask certain questions anymore is leading large volumes of people to contribute online and engage online.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So let's go a level deeper here. I know that we've opened up with the idea that the market is uncertain. There's a lot of challenge. There's a lot of change, and there's a lot of traditional or conventional wisdom that's being challenged right now. So we know all of these things. But to expand on that and to go a level deeper, Kelvin, tell us why, as a business leader, why do I need to care today more than perhaps even 6 months ago or a year ago? Why do I need to care so much today about how people are feeling out there?
Yeah, I think 2020 is going to be a case study for generations to come. I feel like consumer needs and thoughts and opinions are changing weekly. One of the staples of market research was there's always going to be a case study for something that happened 3 months ago or a year ago, and it's based on industry. That doesn't really count anymore. If you're not paying attention on a daily, weekly, at least monthly basis to how people's views are changing, you're always going to be one step behind. And to Kristina's previous note, probably sound tone deaf. And to me, it's the companies who have this intent of speed to insights, and those that act on that speed to insights, that will survive. The days of kind of thumb sucking a strategy, basically just going to leave you with a wet thumb.
All right. So let's move to Chris now to maybe give us some real life examples of how this can go. Because we've obviously talked about the phenomena, we've talked about the patterns, we've talked about some of our own speculations. But Chris, tell us, any real life customer situation right now that stands out to you where you can see this impetus towards more analysis coming to the fore, where it's actually required that people do this in practice, and do you have an example of a situation where it hasn't quite worked out?
Definitely. a really recent example, which I'm sure the audience may have seen this if you're in marketing, the brand space, or even just a consumer of dairy. Why Clover Blue? Hashtag Why Clover Blue. This is the that sort of interesting ad that came out with the guy painted looking like a Smurf. And that's the Clover milk bottles are now all blue, and they challenge people to say, why do you think Clover has blue milk bottles now? So when we dove into this data to understand, how is the market reacting to this campaign, for us, like as a team of analysts, we thought, okay, either people are loving it or they're mocking it, right? Two polar ends of the spectrum. But actually going into social listening technology, we understood that there was this whole undercurrent of pushback against Clover having an owner who's Israeli and saying that Clover milk bottles are blue because they support apartheid Israel. Now let that sink in. They have a funny Smurf video, and now we're talking about a huge controversial political issue. And I'll tell you, almost 50% of the conversation was about boycotting Clover. Super easy just to grab another bottle of a brand of milk off the shelf, right? So for me, that was so surprising. I had no indication that this was going to turn into an Israeli political boycotting conversation. Probably Clover, I don't know if Clover had any indication either, probably not, otherwise they wouldn't have been doing blue milk bottles. But so it was really surprising, and this is so important to get out of the bubble of just what your Facebook or your WhatsApp groups are talking about, because your reality might be a lot different than what's actually happening on the Twitter sphere and the online sphere.
Wow, this is quite an eye opener for me, just listening to that story, because we go from something as humble and innocent and benign as milk, and now we have entered the realm of politics and possibly viewpoints on war in the Middle East. Now, on that note, we're dealing with a planet which has become very politicized in general. People are very opinionated. The viewpoint on politics has caused a sense of divisiveness the world over. We've never seen such a stark contrast between the left and the right, and something that's so pronounced and so understood and so talked about the world over. And it's definitely moving in line with the fact that social media makes political data the world over so easily available. Even South Africans are very in tune with US politics, for example, and everyone has a strong opinion. So taking into account this context of strong opinions, strong sentiments, strong political poles, people are being very polar on the political spectrum. Taking all of these things into account, what are the risks of us not paying attention? What are the risks that we face today as businesses who are trying to stay away from these political conversations, but we inadvertently wind up in them? How do we cope with that? What are the risks? Let's start there.
Yeah, ultimately it's irrelevance to your consumer, and you're opening yourself up to risk to losing those consumers, to boycotting you or switching to your competitor. So ask yourself, if you're blind to the current perception of your brand or of a certain topic, attitudes, behaviors of your audience, how can you prescribe a marketing campaign when you don't know this climate? And second, how can you know the reactions to the moves, outside of your immediate bubble, if you're not listening? And then, of course, wanting to measure the outcomes of those campaigns, course correct things. I mean, Clover could not have seen this coming, right? I mean, maybe there would be a way, and we brainstormed about that. How could they have predicted this? But not paying attention and being uncertain is leaving your brand in a really risky position to lose customers.
All right.
If I can add to that,
Go ahead.
One of the trends and the strategies that some of the top brands are picking up is moving away from this. Traditionally, it was called ORM, online reputation management. Moving away from what are people saying about me, because that's easy. The the harder part and the more valuable part is, what are people saying in general? What are they talking about my industry, about trends, veganism as a trend, Black Lives Matter as a topic. So there's a movement away from looking inward and using the data that's available to look outward, out the window.
All right. I must be honest, I'm feeling very proud, as a leader of Black Fox, because so far the key themes that have come out, we have an Israeli in our team, we have a vegan on our team. So let's just see how many more of our people that you guys choose to pick on. So let's have a look here at this next point. I mean, a friend of mine, Dominic, he's on the call. Dominic Score, I haven't spoken to him in a while. Thanks for putting forward a question. He's asked a particular question. I'll go through it, but I want us to answer it a little bit differently. Maybe we expand the answer a bit. So he's talking about countries that have created digital nomad visas to encourage long-term tourism over this time. And should South Africa be looking at something similar to encourage spending of foreign currency within the country? And do we think that the government will be open to this, considering the trend of restricting rather than open travel? So I think Dominic is opening a can of worms here. And instead of us trying to provide the answer, because I'm not sure whether you guys have the data points at hand, I would rather you guys give an idea of how you would approach this question if you were government. How should government be using tools like Brandwatch, not so much Global Web Index, I assume. How should government be making use of these sentiment analysis tools to inform some of the key political decisions? So let's maybe go to let's start with Kelvin, and then Kristina, if you want to add, you're more than welcome to.
Sure. I think that speaks very much to what I just mentioned about focusing less on what people think about us as a brand and looking more at what they're willing to share out in public, and even from a Global Web Index perspective on solicited surveys. So one of the projects I've just helped work on is the CEO of SA Tourism is very interested in what people's perceptions are from the US, Brazil, Russia, China, about potentially coming to South Africa after the borders open. And while it probably sometimes it seems obvious, there are nuggets that come out there that change strategy and change tactics from a governmental political position as well. So broadening your listening scope and maybe being open to understanding what people are saying outside of our own realm, I think is vital to making these strategic decisions and policy decisions.
All right, makes sense. Kristina, if you want to add, you're more than welcome to.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, just already thinking tactically, how would I approach that? I would want to see what kind of emotion is in the online space about potentially being a digital nomad, like, okay, are people excited about that idea? Like, wow, my dreams are coming true. I can work from a beach in Bali. Or are people afraid of that? Like, oh my God, I have to work from a beach in Bali. So like what emotions are present there? And then how can government decide, should we capitalize on this? Should we create a follow your dreams campaign? Or should we talk more to like the tactical bits of like, you will be well taken care of, there's healthcare in our country kind of vibe. So yeah, a lot of interesting, curious work to do that you can definitely do with social listening to help inform those decisions.
Right.
Maybe just to add to that as well, I think the way these technology platforms have evolved over the years. If we had this discussion 5-6 years ago, we'd be talking about the sentiment. What's this? Is there enough positive sentiment? And I believe analysis has moved past that to the point where we can define very granular insights in between the lines, because people don't really always talk in sentiment. They might say that they would love to come and work remotely in South Africa if it wasn't for X, and those wasn't for X could be a number of categories that need to be tackled from a perception perspective to attract those kinds of people.
Absolutely. Guys, the more we have this conversation, and I just started off the sentence with and I've been very conscious about not saying because is the name of your company, and it is becoming a little bit difficult for me to do that, so I just made another error. But moving on from that, I just want to say that, see, I said it again. Like, why did you have to go and name your company Like, it's the toughest thing. It's the toughest thing to not want to say. Or not, it's the toughest thing to not say. All right.
Drinking.
So I'm gonna keep doing my best here. I think that companies, a lot of business leaders look at a discussion like this and they think, hold on, we're not servicing the consumer market. We're not dealing massively in the consumer space, so we don't need to be as much in tune with the market. And this is a comment from me. It's not a comment from the panelists. We are still, in some shape, size, or format, communicating with a very different animal out there. The market is composed of individuals. It is composed ultimately of consumers. Consumers are people who either buy from your customers, or they buy directly from you, or you're hiring them. I mean, consumer preferences does reflect the individual preferences of the people that you're recruiting. So don't think that this conversation is not relevant to you. It is actually super relevant to you, because this is all about understanding what individual people want and need at this point. On that note, most or many South African companies have had their own data collection methods and strategies over the years. A lot of them feel we've got this. We've got our quarterly survey, we've got our annual survey, we've got our methods, we've got our user groups, we've got our tactics, we've got our tools. Why should they change their approach today? Why should they introduce or possibly consider different techniques or data sets or methods for introducing data into their organization? Shall we start with you, Kelvin?
Yeah, I think, historically there's so many stories about companies that rest on their laurels and don't embrace continually changing landscape. So I don't believe that it's about throwing out the old and replacing it with the new. It's about augmenting what you've already done with better, easier, more efficient ways of getting to the point. And one of the ideas we always have around technology is technology doesn't replace humans, and it definitely doesn't do things that you couldn't do in a more manual way as well. What it does is it scales it and automates most of what you would want to do anyway. So, when we have these kind of discussions, it's more around, if we need to start scaling what we're doing in our understanding, is there a more efficient, cost-effective way of doing that, or do we have to throw 100 people at it to make this work? I suppose for the companies that feel like they're good with their big data strategy from 5 years ago, let's talk in 5 years again.
Right. So, Chris, please, what else do you have to add to that? Kelvin said quite a bit there. What else do you have to say on that?
Yeah, absolutely agree. If you guys are anything like me, you don't want to spend your day reading through 20 pages of data sets and points and trying to make sense of it and thinking to yourself, damn it, there should be a better way. And for us, tech is the better way. It's all about scale. The old ways of collecting data by surveys or focus groups, it means a huge amount of resources, planning, time, money commitment, to have access to just a couple hundred of responses that then have to be manually processed, are going to be out of date in a quarter's time. You can take off the hard work hat and rely on some nice coding and development to make your job a bit easier. So for me, it's all about scale.
All right,
Kristina,
go ahead.
If I can add one more to that, we had a discussion about people, and we're hiring a lot of really intelligent people. And if you don't give them the tools to make their job easier, they're going to be wasted doing the grunt work. We've got tons of stories of these really intelligent analysts who spend hours and hours and hours having to build databases and Excel spreadsheets, whereas their time should be spent actually coming up with the insights. And I feel like there's potentially wasted opportunities in not giving those smart people tools that make things faster and easier.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I definitely want to reintroduce that point in a little bit because I think it's such a big point that you just made. So, by the way, Kristina, I just want to say I've been keeping a little bit of a counter, and you also said in your last answer. So let me take the same question and go a level deeper and make it perhaps a bit tough. There are companies out there that are not necessarily out of touch, so to speak. They are, in fact, investing in data gathering techniques. They have methods that they've evolved over many years. South African companies that have had their methods of doing things. In this particular discussion, if we had to go one level deeper, why should they care if they believe that what they're doing is in fact working and giving them insight?
Yeah, look, there is something to be said about expertise and experience, leading to some very successful guesses at what would work. And let's be honest, if you're not informed by data, you're probably guessing. And they should care because certainty, like we keep repeating, is out the window. Consumer behavior is evolving to deal with a pandemic, a looming recession, hopefully not, and then all the while balancing these trends of sustainable living, sustainable eating, electric cars. All of our dreams for the future are still impacting us, even though we're in a very tough economic time, right? So what my bottom line on why companies should care about data and insights is that even if things are working, there are myths about consumers that brands have. My consumer is this profile. Only to have that myth busted all the time. I did a quick look into Mercedes-Benz data a couple of months ago, and during that particular time, we found that the conversation about some of their car brands were completely female-dominated. Female-dominated car conversations, which you never see on any other automotive brand that I've ever looked at. So for me, that was a huge myth bust, like, hey, Mercedes, your C-Class is totally female-dominated conversation. Maybe you should reach out to those high-earning female execs. Or like their A-Class and G-Class were totally student-dominated conversations. So a bit of the aspirational G-Wagon, students thing going in. So I personally don't know who Mercedes thinks their customers are, but there's always interesting myths to bust about who's actually talking about you online and what they're saying.
So I reckon post this event, there's going to be possibly a new trend that Mercedes is going to potentially see. Suddenly a whole lot of returns or vehicles being traded in by males who are driving C-classes and who have listened to this event and who are now desperately questioning their gender identity. All right, so Kristina, let's have a look at that then. So we're saying that there's this degree of myth busting that can be employed to expose the fact that sometimes we don't have our finger on the pulse. So maybe we have used tried and tested systems, but because they are so locked in terms of their data sets and what they're looking for, that we might not see some of the outliers, which could possibly influence how the market is moving, and it could give an early indication of where things could be in the next year or two. So these are all very valid insights in terms of understanding the market and why it's important to have more, not less. But at the same time, we do have cost pressures. We're running these enterprises where there's so many demands, and you can't just necessarily grant every wish of every employee. Everyone has a wish list. Everyone wants every system there is out there. If we are to be as pragmatic as possible for the typical South African concern, for the typical South African leader out there, what are the absolute must-haves? What must we have in order for us to be successful, do you think?
Yeah. Very, very good question. And I just want to go back to the why. The why is customer closeness, right? And that underscores all the initiatives that the business is doing. So the must-haves are to hear what your consumers are saying about your brand online. So that's sort of that baseline. What are they saying about us? And then also hearing what pain points they have in your industry. So like Kelvin was saying, zooming out into this broader arena, understanding what do people hate about banking in South Africa. They hate long queues at the branches, they hate bad interest rates, they hate not being able to get a hold of anybody. So those big overarching pain points help you with that customer closeness and help put into context what people are saying about your brand. And then, the next thing is to craft those initiatives to solve those pain points and to meet your customers in their language. That's something we can learn from both looking at what they're saying and also this sort of behavioral and attitudinal data. And what I mean by behavioral and attitudinal data is that market research piece where we find out, hey, people who engage with this brand or people who buy this certain thing, who are they as people? Are they private people? Are they more eco-friendly people? Who else do they engage with, and how do they like to engage online? Do they watch videos? Do they spend time on Facebook or Pinterest? So those kinds of little nitty-gritty behavioral and attitudinal things can also really build out customer closeness initiatives.
Right.
Can I deviate slightly, but build on that, because I think there's a couple of important points here as well. So you asked about the trends in the industry earlier, and one of the things we are seeing a lot of and embracing is the fact that not all information, people aren't sharing everything about themselves on social, in public, especially public social. And a lot of the smarter companies are combining what we call unsolicited data, which would be the social stuff, with solicited data, meaning let's go and ask people what they think, even if they're not willing to admit that in a public space. And so there's this small merger of public and private insights about individuals, and the smart companies are the ones that are taking both of those sides to understand a little bit better. And one of the myths, we're talking about myth busting, and we spoke about veganism, and brought to mind the fact that I have two 40-year-old male friends who are recently very adamant or kind of stringent vegans, but they're not going to admit that on Twitter and Facebook. And one of them owns a meat processing company, and the other one owns a burger joint. So who's going to guess that if they were just looking at one set of data? Being able to kind of understand people from a number of different dimensions and audiences from a number of different dimensions is vital these days. And I would call that bare minimum. I would call that table stakes at the moment.
Yeah, I love what you're saying here, and I'm actually having a good chuckle, and I'm not sure how much of my chuckle is coming through sound-wise. If you guys are hearing a suppressed chuckle, it is from me in the background. And the reason why I'm having a good chuckle at this is that it's so fantastic that we get these cool stories about these guys who are vegans and who are running a meat processing business, and one has a burger joint. I really find that funny, and I think that's wonderful. And I think as a statistician, in that's my training, that's my background. I think what we're seeing one of those rare events at this time where, before we would simply write these things off as outliers. We'd say, it's the outliers, it's not part of the normal not one curve, and as a result, we don't really have to bake our decisions around them. And I think that was very much the old think. There was very much the pre-social qualitative think. And right now, with the abundance of qualitative, this rich data that talks about people and things and gives additional levels of nuances, I think it's important to move away from that old-fashioned normal not one think, where a lot of our South African companies have built their businesses on that, and they're not necessarily always in tune with the qualitative factors, which are these outlier types. But the outliers are starting to become less of the exception and more of the rule. And I think that as we see this transition happen with people exhibiting, phenomena which are not necessarily that easy to just plot on a curve, I think we do need to become very qualitative heavy in our methodology, the methodology that we employ internally in businesses. Folks, we're not done with our session. We have a couple minutes more, but I want to encourage you to start completing your surveys. Taryn will be putting the link to the survey in our chat box. So just reach into your chat box and click the link and have that sitting on your desktop while we wrap up the session over the next 10 minutes so that you can give us some feedback, tell us how we're doing. Remember that we bring these sessions to you. We do a ton of work behind the scenes. We do research. We work with our guests. We try to look for guests that are going to give us the right kind of topics and the right kind of viewpoints that you want to hear. So the more feedback you give us, the more we can respond in this whole theme of being aware of what the customer feels. If you give us your feedback openly, we are able to respond in kind, and we are able to bring content to you that you really enjoy. And we really do take your feedback seriously. We read absolutely everything that you write down. So please take a minute and make sure you complete your surveys. We really appreciate that. That's one thing that we do ask of you when you show up. Dom has written another mini dissertation to me. Thank you, Dom, for giving me a ton of text to read live on air. But having said that, I'm just going to take one golden nugget from what you're saying, so bear with me. We can talk afterwards if you have a huge problem with me bastardizing your question/comment. Dom is saying here that the McKinseys of the world, how are they going to survive if the smaller consultants have all these insights, and they can so easily gain all of these insights that typically only the larger consulting firms could do, maybe a few years ago. If this information is so easily democratized right now, and if a lot of the smaller consulting firms can now get access to your tools, how is this going to shake things up? Kelvin, do you want to give that a bash, or Kristina?
Yeah, I could give it a go. I don't think anybody's safe. This is the thing about the world we live in. I mean, if we have to compare it to the music industry, you had to have a massive distribution label behind you to get any airplay, and now anybody with access to the internet can suddenly become a star. So similarly with consultancies and agencies, if you're not at the top of your game, size and funding doesn't really count for much. I mean, unless that funding is used to buy and hire the smartest people in the room, and equip them with the right stuff. So yeah, I don't think that anybody is legitimately safe, especially if they're overcharging.
We're gonna find a way of editing out the last bit, because yet again you take an attack to my ecosystem. I happen to have a close friend who works for McKinsey. So not only have we attacked the Israelis and we've commented on the vegans, but now we've also commented on McKinsey. I think I'm just inviting this. I have a little bit of a bullseye on me right now, huh? All right. By the way, we got a comment from Emily who says that this is a very insightful session with interesting points. So thanks for that, Emily. Let's move on to the next question here. So Chris, we'll send this in your direction. A lot of this sounds a bit like insurance. It's almost like if we don't do this, we're going to be in trouble, and we're only going to understand the trouble that we're going to be in when it's too late, when we have a problem. How do we change this idea that you're only going to see the value of this kind of investment when it's too late? How do we change that notion so that people can start interpreting the value and the power of this kind of thinking and way of operating before trouble hits?
Yeah, definitely. So social listening definitely doesn't have to always have that negative connotation, or this is crisis management. We're seeing today some of the best brands are using this technology to zoom out, like we said, find gaps in the market that their competitors aren't filling, and then get that edge on the competition. You can also, sort of gauge market readiness to launch new products, launch new services. I saw in Gartner's report last week that their sort of CMO spend report, the largest percentage of CMOs said that they would be launching a new product to try to maintain growth over this next year. So how do you understand if that market is ready for that? I'm thinking of Tesla when they went to Latin America. They actually listened for the most mentions of electric cars, around that whole region, to sort of figure out where should we launch. And also to do things like marketing activation in real time. So there's a store in the UK called Co-op, so like Coop, and they had a festival shop, like at Glastonbury or some big festival, right? They did a pop-up grocery store, which you would think is kind of boring, right? But no, they had this hashtag where you could use that hashtag to request things at the store. And what they did was they used social listening to have real-time alerts to know what people were asking for. They loaded a truck and they sent it to the festival. And then they replied to these people, hey, your phone chargers are here. Hey, your ham sandwiches are here. And it was like this great marketing activation using social listening for something very, very positive and, to do more customer closeness at the festival.
Fantastic. So you're saying be led by the vision of a positive outcome, and obviously we do have the incidental benefit of being able to mitigate against negative or react quickly to negative, but that shouldn't necessarily be the driving force. The driving force should be this this ideal of wanting to be close to the customer, understand the customer, serve the need of the customer, and whatever comes with that is that incidental benefit which we will handle as we go along. I really like that viewpoint. It's definitely not necessarily the viewpoint that's the most common viewpoint shared by everyone, but I do think it is the way, in fact, the way in which we should be looking at data analysis and the use of analytics going forward. On that note, Amelia's asked a very important question. Another good friend of mine, Amelia, she's asked, sometimes it seems like the business wants the data, or they want access to the data, but sometimes the ability to act is limited as a result of internal delays. So that could be, I would imagine, in the case of, say, the business wants access to the data and there's a slowdown in the procurement process of the data itself. And then alternatively, what if the business is seeing what's happening out there, but the bureaucracy within the company is preventing action from happening as a result of what we're seeing. So how do you guys, any tips that you have for us on how to deal with these internal situations or delays? Either of you can go first.
Yeah, I could kind of tackle that. It's one of the pet peeves I've had for many years, even from my corporate days, was that there's a lot of noise internally to get the data, show me the graphs, send me the report on a weekly basis. But unless there's a vision from the top and a directive from the top to actually utilize what is being mined for, analyzed, and sent through, it's all in vain. And I don't know if I've told the story on the call already, but Kristina, stop me if I have. But I know somebody in the industry that sent the same social media report to their client 3 weeks in a row just by changing the date, and nobody noticed. He just did it to test whether people were actually paying attention, and that is unfortunately somewhat prevalent. I wouldn't say it's all around, but there's definitely a need for people want to see the graphs, but they don't really know why, because there doesn't seem to be a directive and a vision from the top. And I would just implore anybody who is on this call that has those kinds of that kind of leverage in the organization to drive home the need to actually utilize what you're paying for and what you're paying your staff to help you find. Otherwise, it's a waste of effort and time.
Yeah, I must concur, having seen a lot of what goes on in corporates myself, and I think that one of the techniques that I've seen you guys do really well, and Kristina, you've definitely shown me this from your side as well, you guys do a fantastic job of myth busting, and I think that myth busting is one of the most powerful ways to shake the traditional decision-making process. Like, go up and show people what's actually happening out there, show people what's being talked about. And I know in a number of our conversations that we've had so far, you guys have constantly rattled the cage and shown me things that I wasn't even thinking of. So I think that's really, really, really fantastic. And I would invite the audience out there, complete your survey and say in the little comment box if you want Kristina and Kelvin to perhaps their team to produce 1 or 2 golden nuggets for you guys that's going to rattle the cages within your businesses or the customers that you serve. I would invite you to do a myth busting session and just say who you are and what you're about and what sentiment analysis you're interested in, and let them go ahead. I'm kind of offering up services that I didn't even check with them, but I would invite you to put that through in the feedback form so that we know if you're interested in rattling a few cages by looking at what the market is saying. If you feel that your business is not congruent with what the market wants, I invite you to do that and let us know, and then we'll go and ask nicely at the doorstep of Kelvin and Kristina, and I'm pretty sure they will accommodate as much as they can. But I can't make promises on their behalf. I can promise that I will ask. All right. So as we start to wrap here, we're probably going to run over a minute or two. So guys, just bear with us, and please, before you leave, make sure you complete your surveys and put in a request. If you want something, put in a request. We're not going to say no. We're going to figure out a way to work it out. Let's see here. I'm going to just jump a little bit here, and I'm going to make sure that we address this one point about this feeling of being beholden to a supplier. A lot of companies feel we like to do a lot of our data gathering and data analysis in-house because we don't want to be beholden to an external supplier who's sitting with all of our data sets about our customers and people. That there's a mindset there. How do you respond to that mindset, Kelvin?
Yeah, I don't think there should be that fear. The days of on-premise, these massive enterprise on-premise solutions are kind of fading away, and companies are building tech stacks, we find, to kind of give them a little bit of flexibility to ensure that they bring in the best what we call point solutions to answer certain things. And with that brings a security that you can shift from one technology to another if the previous one isn't handling your needs. So it's very seldom, I think, that we come across the point where especially specifically around social listening. I remember a couple of years ago, nobody wanted to, switch their social listening tools because they're like, oh, 3 years worth of data that we've been paying for, and now we're going to lose it. That's not really a thing anymore, because most of the good technologies out there can just go back historically and retrieve that data from the public spaces anyway. So less and less, I would say.
Absolutely. So this is really good to hear, because I think that these are old-fashioned notions and these are old-fashioned ideas, because we need to move forward into this future of working more as an ecosystem where we're not just the hierarchical employer who tries to bring in all of the expertise under one roof. We have to make the best use of division of labor, where there's areas of specialization, that pockets of excellence that sit outside of our company. How do we tap into that? So I really like the viewpoints on that. And then just from a risk point of view, just to make sure we cover our bases, from a privacy point of view, we've got the pressure of GDPR. We've got this ongoing looming pressure of POPI, just keeps going on and on and on. So how do we stack in amongst all of these pressures for privacy and data management and all of that? Just give us your quick thoughts on that, Kelvin, before we wrap.
Yeah, I think most of the best platforms out there are very much sticking by the rules. The fact that there are guidelines are very important. As a consumer myself, I don't want my private data mined, and we've specifically chosen technologies that don't bypass those restrictions and guidelines. So a lot of what we are doing is either solicited, ask people for the information, or it's mined from, I shouldn't say mined, that's the wrong word, but it's taken from public forums where people have given their opinions in hopefully platforms that they understand are public. There are a couple of bad players in the market, I guess, that mine private data, and I would just say interrogate that, ask the right questions, make sure that you're not blinded by the fancy sales pitch that they can potentially do something that doesn't seem like it should be able to be done.
Absolutely. We're going to take one last question here. It's also from another very dear friend of mine, Leslie Holm. Leslie is a specialist recruiter. I know she's arguably the top recruiter in food, in the food industry, perhaps continentally, if not globally. And she's talked about Zoom interviews, and she's talked about the fact that they've changed a lot of their recruitment techniques in line with what's going on in the market right now. And I think that what we're seeing is that, and this is just an additional comment that I'm making, Leslie didn't make this comment, that people are starting to see the need is actually people. We still need people. The format of how we work with people and how we employ people, that's changing, but we still need people. People need people. So that's definitely, I feel, coming through a lot in the market right now. And Leslie's asking, what are some of the bright ideas that we can do or employ, or what can we do differently? What new service or offerings can be expanded into, taking into account that this recruitment machine has changed so dramatically? What are some of the other things that they can expand into? I know it's probably a big thing, but do you have any guidance on what kind of data you would use or how you would solve that problem, team?
I don't know. It's not really a sector that we paid a lot in. If I can deviate slightly from that, because I do have an opinion on people, and maybe not on recruitment, but one of the ways we always internally talk about our tech is that it's kind of like Photoshop. You can buy Photoshop, but unless you actually recruit somebody and hire somebody to build your banners, Photoshop's not going to spit out these incredible posters and ads for you. You still need somebody intelligent to drive the machine, and maybe the answer is that when you're looking at recruiting, it's about understanding of the tools that are available, who can leverage that the best, and maybe making some decisions on that. Probably not what you were asking, Leslie, but it's an attempt.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a valid attempt, and these are very good insights. And I think that honestly, Leslie, if I were you, I would put a comment into the box, and maybe we have a discussion, a follow-up conversation about how, a sizable recruitment agency, how does a recruitment agency get more in tune with the market? What are some of the tools and techniques that could be employed by an agency that has a very strong customer base? So maybe that's a conversation we can pick up. I have invited upon myself quite a lot of interesting comments. Amelia says that I sound like Barbara Streisand. People need people, with a smiley face. Okay, it's a pleasure. And then folks, on that note, before you depart, before you leave us, I do ask again, make sure that you have completed the survey. I mean, it's a super quick survey. It's probably one of the quickest ones we've ever done. It's really important to us. I want to say a very hearty thank you to our guests. I really thoroughly enjoyed the conversation today. So many pearls of wisdom, just a wonderful discussion on things that are so pertinent right now. I wish that this conversation could go on a little bit more, but we have to be respectful of everyone's calendars. So on that note, thank you to our guests. Chris and Kelvin, you just have been great. You've been spilling pearls of wisdom to us, and I really appreciate the time that you spent with us today. And team, look forward to more installments of Table Manners for Robots. We will be bringing you more content like this, more discussions like this with field experts. Stay in close touch with us. We will be broadcasting this episode. It's currently streaming on YouTube Live, on Facebook Live. We will also get it housed on YouTube, so you can always refer back. And then this will also be published on both two podcast stations, Spotify and Apple. All right, so on that note, guys, thank you so much for joining. It's been a fantastic session, and we will see you in about 2 weeks' time. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate.